Third thing is investment. Brings me to this. I found a book. I was going through my office and I found a binder that had the original Constitution of Garden City Chapel. And it was wrapped up with a book on the history of Baptists. I was really profound with the 372 pages of this church writing about being Baptist and how they were just bent on never using the word Baptist in anything that they do, but they were Baptist, and they were writing about the history of Baptist. It was intriguing. You say, why are you holding a bank? Well, I knew that this church originally was started here by two grandmamas with a backyard Bible club. But I didn't really fully understand the investment that was made here. There's a family that lived in Wallingford named the Crenshaws. They were part of Maranatha Baptist Church. We're a church planting church. By the way, December 4th, Sunrise Baptist in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania launches. It's our new sister church. It's your daughter church. You're having a hand in this. You allow me to mentor guys. I'm mentoring the guy. Maranatha allowed the Crenshaws, who were faithful members, to start another church. You see, he was a businessman. He owned a luggage company in Chester. Sunday afternoons after church, he and his wife and some of their friends from Maranatha started a backyard Bible club in what was then the Garden City section of Chester. They sowed seed and ministered to kids. It was interesting. Member of another church that lived in Wallingford, sowing seed because he saw kids in the neighborhood that didn't have Christ. He saw families that didn't really have a church. They got members from their church at Maranatha to partner with them. The church at Maranatha said, go for it. Drugstore owner in Chester heard about what they were doing, and they said, well, you need a regular place to put a tent up. We bought this piece of ground here where our parking lot is, and in the midst of depression, and this goes back to learning from the Depression, in the midst of some of the hardest times America has faced since the Civil War, a group of people built an afternoon Sunday school of 150 kids in a tent. They needed a building to meet in. God got a hold of Crenshaw's heart. They sold their uppity house in Wallingford and bought a smaller house in Upland that met the need. And they gave the church, which didn't have a pastor at that time, just a group of people from Maranatha Baptist, $10,000 to build a building above us on the top of the hill. And they, as we know, as Vic will laugh, rolling his eyes, they didn't hire a contractor with that money. They just bought building materials and figured out, we don't care about code, we're just going to put it up. Some parts of it they did really well. Some parts, well, we fixed later. But they invested. Why am I holding this back? Because you see, they got passionate about missions. Very passionate. Do you know that there's a couple Bible college professors that came out of Garden City Chapel? Do you know that a whole bunch of African missionaries came out of the youth program at Garden City Chapel? Do you know that Mr. Crenshaw built these banks that whenever someone would want to talk about missions, he would give them a bank. Sometimes out of the shape of Africa, sometimes out of the shape of a church building. I have a suspicion, I can't prove it, because there's not a stamp on the bottom, but I have a suspicion he probably built this to give to somebody, to remind them about the investment. Here's the thing. That's our heritage. By the way, John Piper or Chuck Swindoll, one of them was talking this week about what's this basis of fellowship? It's not doctrine, it's heritage. Our basis for fellowship is not our doctrine. Our basis for fellowship is this rich heritage we have. You just say with a rich heritage, we celebrate the rich heritage we have. Guess what? The little things that we don't agree on melt. Because there's always going to be nitpicky little things that we might not agree with somebody else. Shoot, man, there's people in my leadership team that don't 100% agree with me on everything. But what we don't agree on is so stinking minute, okay? Some of us don't agree on when Jesus is coming back. We agree that he's coming back. Some before the rapture. Some, well, maybe in the middle of it. Some, well, maybe after it. It's going to pan out. It's going to happen. Are we going to be dysfunctional because of that minor issue? We are agreeing that he's coming back. You see, if you focus on the minute stuff, you become Harold Camping. You really do. You really, truly do. Folks, we're a new church. We're 4.5 years in. But you gotta hear this. This heritage of 80 years that we inherited happened. We're ministering to the exact same families in the neighborhood 80 years later, in some cases. The exact same spiritual problems that have been here for 300 years are still here. And it's on our watch now. We have freedom as a church because we prayer walk. We're on campuses now because we prayer walk those campuses 9, 10, 12 times a year. Some of those campuses, I've prayer walked at least every 2 weeks for 5 years now. And we have nothing, just incubating now on one of them. We serve because it's not the cool thing to do or what's going to grow the church. We serve because it's the biblical mandate. We meet needs because God said to meet needs. We creatively meet needs because we are a bunch of creative people. We make investment in the kingdom because it's the biblical mandate that we're called to. So as we end one series and begin another, bringing hope, we're now talking about how do we bring hope to the world. You see, one of the gifts of Christmas is you and how God's wired you. I am very much an encourager. I am very much a guy who's been called by God to go touch people's lives. I'm not a guy, even though I have a lot of cool books, I'm not a guy who's going to spend a whole bunch of time reading dead languages. I hang out with guys like that who tell me what I need to know, or I can call what I need to know. How God has wired me is to go give a cup of cold water and bless people. How's God wired you? How are you going to make an investment in the kingdom? How are you going to serve the kingdom? You know? Crenshaws believed in a vision to start a church. They sold their large home, moved to a smaller home to give the resources. You know, $10,000 in 1928 was a big chunk of change. I don't know what that translates to, but that's huge. Houses were going for maybe $4 or $5 grand back then, the big ones. I'm not saying that's what we should do. I'm saying that's what they did. We are here because that's what they did. We have this privilege of picking up the mantle. And here's the thing. The chapel, as it was called, was started, it was actually called the Lord's Temple. There's somewhere around here we got the big banner. We should probably do a wall of history one of these years. But they were passionate about reaching kids. It's no mistake that someone who is passionate about reaching the next generation would be called to plant a church where a group of people at one time were passionate about reaching the next generation. We were doing exactly what they did almost 100 years ago. Listen. So here's the call. Are you willing to go? Are you willing to make the investment? Are you willing to serve? I'm not talking about a corporate thing. I'm talking about a drama. It was so beautiful. Parent was the perfect choice. I knew you had two to pick from. Someone has because someone gave. Someone knows Christ because someone's willing to share. This week, 9 families had food because last weekend somebody was willing to help us go to the Boy Scouts for the food drive, and we brought back 30 large boxes. Define for yourself going into the new year. This is a time when you can sit down and say, I want 2012 to be different than 2011. You need to sit down with yourself and have a talk. You need to sit down and say, you know, God, you've made me this way with these gifts. I want to use them in 2012. God, I'm a steward. You've blessed me with this. And Lord, I'm going to get in and learn how you operate so I can participate in making a difference in the kingdom. Lord, I want to learn about the spiritual world, to know how to pray, to commune with you, and to see you. We do those 3 things. Delaware County will never be the same again. We're planting churches. We are multiplying. Sunrise starts December 4th. We're in discussion now with Ronhurst to plant a church up there with Bill and Captain Matt. God is moving through this body. Don't ever look at the numbers, the size. Look at the